Imagine you're the President of the United States. How would you handle a nuclear crisis? In fact, how would any decision maker handle one? SIS professor Sharon Weiner approaches this question in a somewhat unconventional way, through virtual reality. That's VR for short. There haven't been many nuclear crises throughout history, so it's difficult to study decision-making in the wake of such a threat. But by simulating a nuclear emergency with a VR headset, Weiner posits that you can learn how leaders might respond.
With virtual reality, there's 40 years of experiments showing that when you're in a virtual reality headset, you actually think you're in another world. So the idea is to put a bunch of people into this virtual reality experience and see how they respond and to understand the likely patterns of behavior that would actually happen in a real nuclear crisis.
This is a joint project between Weiner and Moritz Kurt at the Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy at the University of Hamburg. When the participants of this project put on the VR headset, they see through the eyes of the U.S. president in the midst of an emergency involving nuclear weapons. They can speak with their advisors, ask them questions, but at the end of the day, they alone need to make a big decision. I got the chance to experience a version of this simulation, putting myself in the shoes of the commander-in-chief.
Do you recognize this room?
It's very familiar. Is it the Oval Office?
It is the Oval Office.
Oh, wow. This is what it's like.
It is. Actually, it really is what it's like. This is a representation of it. And if you look even in virtual reality, if you look even closely at some of the details, for example, if you look at the desk, you'll see the wood grain. If you walked up close to the flags, you'd see the detail of the flags.
Oh my goodness. An important consideration of this project is making the VR scenario as grounded in reality as possible. Matthew Hartwell, a PhD student at SIS, is working with Weiner to help replicate what would happen in reality.
So this kind of expands our knowledge in the way that we can look at how individuals respond to something that feels real, that feels like a real nuclear threat. It feels like they have to make this choice in the same way that a president would in a close call situation.
During a nuclear threat, one would hope that a decision maker would think as rationally as possible, using reason to form their response. But according to Weiner, that's not likely.
In a crisis where one person alone gets to make a decision about whether we all live or die, that one person, we all hope they're rational. Deterrence requires them to be rational, but all the literature we know about decision making in such crises says they won't be.
In the case of a nuclear crisis, it's not clear what exactly would go on inside a decision maker's head. But this VR project may bring us a step closer toward understanding that mental state and the consequences of our current nuclear strategy.
So the whole goal of this experience is to confront people with the logical consequences of current U.S. nuclear strategy and to help them understand that in the event of a crisis, there are no good options. And the bureaucracy that's trying to get you to respond in this crisis, each part of it is all pushing you to make a decision or to fulfill a certain obligation. But collectively, those things aren't necessarily about making the best choice, right? They all have the thing they're supposed to do, and that's the thing they're doing. But you, as President of the United States, you're responsible for the sound decision. But how do you know what to do?